All right, John, we're here at Pier 17 at the Seaport. It's a beautiful day. We're here at the Fulton restaurant. People are having a good time. John, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your role, and also Howard Hughes Corporation.
You know, a little bit about me. I think that as I look back and look through where I am today, it certainly wasn't a straight line. There were some twists and turns along the way, but it's been an exciting journey so far. And if I could go back to the beginning, just quickly, I grew up in South Louisiana and spent all my life there. I went to college there in the city of Lafayette. And when I was in college, it really wasn't until my sophomore year when I first got a glimpse into the world of business. And once I got that glimpse, it really changed my outlook on what I wanted to do in life, what I wanted my career to look like. And so I think I always knew I wanted a job doing something like I'm doing today as the chief of staff, but I just wasn't necessarily sure how to get there. So, you know, it's my sophomore year, I've got a few years left, and I switched my major to finance, and I start getting everything I can get my hands on as far as reading materials and taking classes, building a network, and starting to find mentors who can sort of guide me along the path that I wanted to get to. I was securing internships, and ultimately, when I graduated, I landed a job here in New York at Goldman Sachs. And I think getting my foot in the door there was really the stepping stone to help accelerate my career. And I think what it was the environment, and you know, as you know, Brian, I know you're a Goldman alum yourself. Being in that fast-paced environment, you know, you have a lot of deliverables, not much room for mistakes. There's a lot of pressure, but I think for me it was really good because it built this foundation. And so I spent 2 years at Goldman. Around that time, I wanted to move back down to the South, and so I had my sights set on the Woodlands, Texas. And the Woodlands is just north of Houston. And I was working for an oil and gas company that was owned by Blackstone. And I was building out their FP&A program for about 2 years and putting in the financial infrastructure. Around the 2-year mark, there's this real estate development company, the Howard Hughes Corporation, that's relocating their headquarters from Dallas to the Woodlands. And I knew a little bit about the company, and I always thought it was interesting. And I had a few connections that knew people who worked there, and discovered that they were looking for someone in investor relations to bring someone on the IR team. So a few months later, I end up at the company in IR, and you know, here we are 3 years later, still you know, blowing and going. And I think you know, what's interesting is the uniqueness of Howard Hughes, and I think that working for a company like Howard Hughes is filled with excitement, a lot of new things, a lot of new ventures that you can get into, and it just leaves room for a lot of opportunity. And to kind of touch on Howard Hughes, we're a real estate developer, and we build these master plan communities that span 10, 20,000 acres.
Wow. And
you know, given, you know, we're here in Manhattan, typically our communities are about twice the size of Manhattan, if not bigger. And it takes decades to build these out. And so while we fit into the bucket of a real estate developer, we think of ourselves as community builders, because we play the game of SimCity every day. If you're familiar with that game,
yes.
You know, we decide where the roads go, where the residential housing goes, and even where the commercial real estate, the office, the retail, where all of that is placed. And we do this every single day, and over decades it creates this really unique and vibrant place to live. And for me, I don't really know another company that I could go to where I could have exposure to commercial real estate, residential, interacting with home builders, and even some of the more unique parts of the business where we partner with chefs here in New York City. And we also own a minor league baseball team outside of Las Vegas in our Summerlin community. So it's really exciting. It's an exciting time for our company, and it's really an exciting time for me.
Howard Hughes, in terms of as a company, and you mentioned master plan communities, tell us a little bit more about sort of the regions where you guys develop, and also we're here in New York City, what this particular region, what it means, and how it might be different from some of the other communities around the U.S.
Yeah, so all of our regions are traditional MPCs, which are, you know, the thousands of acres that I've talked about. They're mostly concentrated in Houston, where we have 3 master plan communities, the Woodlands that I mentioned, the Woodland Hills, and Bridgeland, which is in West Houston. And then outside of Las Vegas, 7 miles off the Strip, we have 22,000 acres in a community called Summerlin. And then more recently, we acquired 37,000 acres outside of Phoenix. So we're positioned all around there. Those are some of our traditional master plan communities. We also have condos that we develop in Oahu, on the island of Oahu in Hawaii, and Columbia, Maryland. And so we're really scattered all around, but what we do is we build communities. And the structure of the business is to segment residential and commercial. And so we take large swaths of land and we segment what the residential component will be. And we take land and we sell it to home builders. They build homes and that brings residents into the community. And then that sparks demand for commercial. So we use the proceeds from the land sales as our equity contribution for commercial development. And we build office and retail, even medical office buildings and a variety of different assets. That sparks demand for people to come into the community, so the residential side then fires up again, and it creates this, what we call a virtuous cycle of value creation. Right. The Seaport is a unique asset, but it ties into our portfolio because we're building a community here at the Seaport. It's a historic Manhattan neighborhood, and so what we're doing is we're revitalizing this place. Pier 17, where we're at now, and it's a mixed-use asset with restaurants on the bottom. We have office with our tenants, like Nike's design studio, ESPN films hours of broadcast here every day, and then we have a rooftop where we right now have our summer concert series going on. And then the tin building behind us, we're going to head to in a minute. Really unique asset just by itself, 53,000 square feet, over 20 restaurant experiences. So creating or enhancing the vibrancy of this neighborhood is really what it's all about. So we're excited with what we've been able to do so far and where we're heading.
Question for you in terms of what makes an MPC successful. So you mentioned getting the residential folks in and inviting sort of the commercial tenants. Can you delve a little bit more into what really makes a community as vibrant as what you typically see in the Howard Hughes development?
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, people want a better quality of life, and that's what we've seen coming out of the pandemic. And you hear this exodus of people leaving these coastal states and coming to the Sun Belt, and that's where we have a lot of our communities, and we've experienced a lot of success over the last few years because we do provide that quality of life, and we provide a place where people can live, work, and play. And a lot of developers use that term, live, work, and play, but it really is something that we truly do deliver, and we do it over a period of decades. So I guess the longevity is what sets Howard Hughes apart, because to build something that takes 50 plus years to do, you have to do it right, from the beginning to the end. And we repeat this process over and over and over, and that's really the uniqueness that I would say. And part of that goes into thinking about not just where the residential housing goes or the commercial development goes, because that's where we make our profits, but also thinking about where the parks go. Where's that next trail system going to go? We have a ton of acres that are just dedicated to open green space. Right. And so it's just as much art as it is science.
Wow. And tell us a little bit about the importance of food when it comes to these communities. Like we're here at a beautiful restaurant here. I know you have Jean-Georges, at the Tin Building. What role does food play in building up the community and also the ultimate success of that community?
Yeah, so restaurants, it ties the whole community together. And what we've seen, especially over the last few years, is more of a shift in the consumer and where they're spending. So they're spending more on experience these days and not as much on items. And they want to be surrounded by family and friends and have a memorable moment. And so when we bring restaurants into our community, we don't just want to bring a place where people can eat, but where they can have that experience. And so each of our communities, it kind of has its own personality and own identity. So all of our restaurants are tailored to that community so that when people go there, they can have that unique experience. I think the Tin Building is a good example, bringing food into a community and how you can have a lot of different concepts but still make it work all together. Mm-hmm. So the Tin Building has over 21 to be specific, 21 dining offerings.
Wow.
A lot of different flavors under one roof, but we worked in partnership with Jean-Georges, renowned New York City chef.
Right.
Spending years making sure that we had the right product and the right offerings to where it is all tied together. And in doing that, we have a taste for everybody's palate.
Now, John, you seem awfully young to be chief of staff at one of the largest real estate development companies, in the world. How did you get to where you are so quickly? Most of the people in your shoes would be in their 40s, I would imagine. So what would you say as some of the key milestones in your career to get to be able to be where you are today as chief of staff?
I think really what it comes down to, it's quite simple, but for me it's just been an unrelenting work ethic and a purpose-driven focus, and just working as hard as I can day in and day out. So I guess it's maybe the secret sauce that's not so secret, but to put a little bit more context into that, for me what's worked is going above and beyond just a job description. And what's helped me is every company that I've been able to work for is finding ways that I can add value, and at the end of the day, making management's lives easier. And I feel like if you're able to do that, it helps you stand out. And a couple examples, I build out these dashboards. That's one of the first things I do if I come into a company, is try to build out a simplified view of the company and how it's operating with financial results that are updated in real time. And I feel like that's helpful for me, and then I've presented that to management a couple times, and it's always been met with a really good response. Or finding if you're at a company that's been around for a while, there's probably a lot of redundant processes that have been around, and it's this is the way it's been done, and that's how we're going to continue to do it. And I've come in and found ways to speed up the process, maybe find ways to put automation in there, put it in a cleaner way, in a cleaner format, and a lot of times, you can find a few manual errors that you can squeeze out. More recently, I guess as it relates to Howard Hughes, whenever I joined the company, I was in investor relations, and I sat in on a ton of investor calls and listened to what people were asking, what they wanted to know about the company, and there were a few repetitive questions from the investors that would circle in and out. So what I did after that was I created this dashboard that was tailored to the questions that were commonly asked.
Right.
And it kind of was a cheat sheet for management to use during calls. So, there's a ton of numbers floating around, and it's all public information, and you want to give these investors the right information right away. So to have that cheat sheet was very helpful for them, and it was been updated every quarter. And 3 years later, management's still using that. And so I think doing things like that has really helped make me stand out from the rest of the pack.
Yeah, so it all comes down to basics, right? Work hard, make your managers' lives easier, right?
It really is that simple.
But that's excellent. Congratulations on the success, and thanks for sharing a little bit about the Howard Hughes Corporation, and look forward to seeing some of the restaurant and the food as we walk around here on Pier 17.
Absolutely.
All right, John. So we're here standing Pier 17. So let's walk around. And why don't you share with us a little bit about how Howard Hughes developed the Seaport here and some of the restaurant concepts?
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. So the Seaport is a bunch of mixed-use real estate, mixed-use assets, spans about 450,000 square feet.
Wow.
And we have partnerships with a bunch of renowned chefs. So, it's not just Jean-Georges, which was the Fulton where we were sitting at, but it's also Andrew Carmelini, Elena Henderson, and partnering with those chefs and bringing them here, again, it ties in the neighborhood. It enhances the vibrancy, and people know those names. And so foodies in New York City, and even those tourists who hop off on the big red buses, they'll stop by just to try a meal. And so Pier 17 was really one of the first big assets that we brought here. It was a redevelopment play. And like I said, you have the restaurants here, you have office space, and you have concerts on the rooftop. on the concerts, I mean, we sell, last year we sold almost 200,000 tickets.
Wow.
Big names. And outside of that, we have a bunch of events. Last year, we had a full takeover of the Bored Ape Yacht Club. If you're, if you're familiar with cryptocurrencies and NFTs and blockchain. And so during NFT week, this place was full of all these Bored Ape Yacht Club, crypto NFT owners. It was all over the place. It was great. And so again, it shows you all the uniqueness that this asset brings and what it's done for the neighborhood.
Wow. What type of demographic comes to the Seaport? If you were to describe the demographic here, who comes here and what sort of like commercial tenants find, what type of commercial tenants actually reside in the building?
So the demographics, it's pretty broad.
Okay.
Who comes here? I think if you're a tourist or if you're somebody visiting, the food's the first attraction. This is why you want to come here. But I think it's also for someone who wants to come and they want to have this unique experience all in one place. And I can give you an example of myself. So next week, the end of this week, my wife and I are going to be here. And on Saturday, we're going to go to the Tin Building and we're going to go grab a late lunch. After that, we're going to walk right next door. We're going to go to Pier 17 and go see a concert on the rooftop. And then after that, we're going to head downstairs and we're going to go have dinner at the Fulton.
That's awesome.
So we can spend a whole day in New York City in one spot. And on top of that, you have great views of the Brooklyn Bridge, Empire State Building, Statue of Liberty. And so to do that all in one place in New York City, it's pretty unique. And what sets it apart is that you can't replicate it.
Right.
It's really hard to replicate something like this, and that's why people want to be here. It's enhanced the foot traffic, the uniqueness of what we've been able to bring. In 2022, we saw a 50% increase in foot traffic just at Pier 17.
Wow.
And I think a lot of that ties into adding something like the Tin Building, because again, it just adds that layer of uniqueness to it.
So we're here at a beautiful restaurant. You talk about experience. Just walking into this restaurant, you see just the beauty, just how everything is elegantly put together. And so one of the key areas that we talk about at the Food Institute is kind of the food service strategy of organization. So talk to us a little bit about how Howard Hughes thought about the design of this restaurant as it relates to bringing in different sort of operators and what sort of trends that you're seeing in the marketplace when it comes to food and restaurants.
Yeah, so this restaurant in particular, Seeds and Weeds, it's a fully vegan concept. So if you're familiar with Jean-Georges and his restaurants, one of his staples is ABC and then ABCV. So this is more of a fast casual concept spin to that. And so it's one of those unique offerings that we have here. So you've got vegan, vegetarian right out the door. You have a nice bar, and then a pizza place, Frenchman's Dough. So you can get pizza and pastas, and then across the way we have a taco stand, and then next to that we have an Asian fusion restaurant, and then right next to that we have a film studio where people who are cooking, you can have a production, you can have media come in there, and then when it's not being used, then it's a private dining hall for companies or for anyone who wants to have an event. So it's a little bit of mix of everything where you can walk through and hit all of these spots. Right behind us we have a bunch of olive oils and things that you would use to cook. And there's private label, Tin Building, Jean-Georges olive oils that you can buy, and that's scattered throughout. So you can come here and have a meal. You can come and pick up some of your groceries and some of the ingredients that you want to cook back at home.
Yeah, I find that strategy really fascinating because, as you know, the food service industry really got impacted during COVID, right? And as you know, restaurant margins are already thin as they are, but to think about other sort of revenue streams? So you mentioned kind of like the olive oil branded tin building and Jean-Georges. That seems to be a new growth area for a lot of these restaurant concepts. So talk to us a little bit about kind of the thought process around that. Was that, how do you see that sort of branded food products as part of the overall growth strategy, for Howard Hughes?
Yeah, so I think that's one segment where it could be a potential revenue stream that we could grow over time. So the private label products, certainly some expansion area into that, and so it's kind of refining, what do you want those products to be? Is there an opportunity to sort of mass produce that? And the tin building, it's pretty new. We opened it late last year, so we're tracking all the data and seeing what works, what people want. I think that's a big part of all this, is tracking the consumer, seeing what piques their interest, and capitalizing on that. I think we've been able to work with Jean-Georges over the years because we've had a partnership, like I mentioned earlier, but last year we had the opportunity to expand that partnership. So we invested $45 million for a 25% stake in Jean-Georges restaurants, and the reason in doing that is because we've had a great partnership already, and now we have the opportunity to expand the concepts into our master plan community. So not just the Seaport, but into potentially the Woodlands and into Summerlin. And so building on all of that and forming that partnership, we'll have this great bond, and we'll elevate together.
In terms of sort of like the cuisines and dishes and things that what you're seeing across sort of the various communities, how would you characterize the interest level in, let's say, Mexican cuisine versus kind of Asian cuisine, Japanese, and tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the growth areas as it relates to specific types of cuisines.
So it's an interesting question, and I would say that it's interesting because when we look at not just the Seaport, but really all of our communities and the restaurants that we have there, I probably sound like a broken record at this point because we want to have variety, we want to have something for everybody. And so the trends, it's hard to pick out one particular trend, one cuisine or one dish, because each of those communities has its own personality and its own identity. And so what may be popular in Summerlin would be different in New York, would be different in Bridgeland. But what we like to do is kind of cast a wide net, so that someone can go, and if they want to have a casual meal, at a Mexican restaurant, they can do that, and if they want to have a steak, they can go in and they can do that as well.
One of the things I've noticed, particularly around that Gen Z kind of millennial, is just a gravitation towards kind of plant-based and vegan. So we're sitting here at a vegan restaurant. So talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing from that standpoint of that movement towards sustainability, eating more vegetables, whether that's because of health or animal welfare. Tell us a little bit what you're seeing there.
Yeah, the health and wellness is huge,
right.
And so you do see more of kind of the vegan concepts, but also just using fresh ingredients and farm to table. And we've seen a lot of attraction towards that, and we see it here at the Seaport with our restaurants. I mean, there's a very strong focus on providing the best quality meal that people want to eat, and we see that throughout our portfolio in some of the restaurants and some of the tenants that we've been able to bring in. So if you think about Howard Hughes, we own the real estate, so we're the landlord. So on the retail side, we own 3 million square feet. A decent portion of that are the restaurants. So to bring in those restaurants that are going to provide the food that people want to eat, it's crucial. So as the consumer's palate is shifting towards that better quality health and wellness, we've seen that shake out in our tenant mix, and so that just goes to show that we're adapting to that change.